Controlling level of detail is very important in 3D. Sometimes you'll need to remove detail. And if your object is parametric or procedural, it's really easy. You can just dial up and down the number of segments. However, if the object has been converted to editable or collapsed, then of course those parameters don't exist any longer and all you have is a raw mesh object. And that's the case with this version of the lampshade that we created in the chapter on spline modeling. It started out as a lathe, but now I've converted it to editable poly. I'll select it and just show you. If we go to the Modify panel, it's an editable poly object, and it has no parameters. What I'd like to do is knock down the level of detail, because we're never going to see this object up close like this. In my final rendering of the loft apartment, the lampshades are going to be pretty far back. They might only take up this amount of area on the screen. And in that case, each one of those polygons is only going to be a few pixels in size. I can knock the level of detail down here. Let's see what the polygon count is to begin with. There's a really helpful tool or command in 3ds Max, which is the statistics of the scene. In any viewport, you can press the 7 key on your keyboard, and you will see the statistics. And this is telling me that I've got over 5,000 polygons in the scene currently. And this is the only object in the scene. So this thing is 5,000 polygons, and that's really kind of heavy, so I can knock this down. Let's select some edges. I'll select that object and go into Edge Subobject mode. And as I showed you earlier, we can select edge loops. If I double-click on an edge, I will select the entire edge loop. And for the vertically running lines of longitude here, it actually will select all the edges interior to the object as well. If you want to remove edges, you don't want to use the delete key on the keyboard because that will remove the edges, but it'll also remove the adjoining polygons. It'll punch a hole. So if I press delete here, boom, now my model's got issues. Okay, and that's very hard to fix that. So you don't want to actually delete using the delete key. I'll undo that with Control-Z. Instead, you want to use the remove tool. And what I'm going to do now is select every other edge loop on the model, just to make it a really clear example of how we can destructively remove level of detail, but not punch a hole in the model. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select every other edge loop, both horizontally and vertically, and we'll pause the video and we'll come back once I've selected all of those. All right, I've selected every other edge on the model in the both longitudinal and latitudinal axes and interior as well. And by the way, you can save this selection if you ever needed to get back to it. You could just go up here to this little pull-down list where it says Create Selection Set, and we could call this one Edges to Delete or something like that. Press the Enter key, and we can always get back to that selection if we need to. Of course, if I unselect, I can use the Control-Z undo to get my selection back. But this is just kind of an insurance policy in case I do a whole bunch of other commands and I need to get that selection back. You just go up here and it's right there. Cool. So we're ready to remove all these edges to knock the level of detail down. We got 5,000 polygons here and 5,000 vertices as well. If I hit the delete key, I would punch a big hole. In fact, I would probably delete the entire model. But on the ribbon, we have a command, remove. All right, now this is a tricky one. If you click remove, then it will look like you've knocked the level of detail down quite a lot. You'll notice that the number of polygons went down to only 1,300 from 5,000 and something. But take a look at this. The number of vertices has not been reduced by that much. It's now at 3,900, where it started at 5,000 and something. What's going on here? Well, when you use the remove tool, it's not really optimal because it removes all the edges, but it does not remove the associated vertices. And what we have here now are a bunch of what I call orphan vertices. They're just hanging out and they're not really doing anything. If I go to Vertex Subobject mode, now you can see what I'm talking about. Everywhere there used to be an edge loop, the edges are gone, but the vertices are left behind. And we've got these quadrilateral shaped polygons, but instead of being 4-sided, they're now 8-sided. We haven't really improved the performance of this object. But there's a way to do this so that you will remove the edges and all of the associated vertices. I'm going to undo a few times. Go up here. Let's go into Edge Subobject mode once again. And we've got all of our edges selected. And we can remove them and remove the associated vertices. But this is a trick. It's not exposed in any obvious way in the interface. What you need to do is hold down the Control key and click on this icon. Or even better, the shortcut is Control and Backspace on your keyboard. So either Control click to remove, boom, and our vertex count went way down. That's cool. All right, I'll undo that with Control Z. Or I can use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control Backspace. Does the same thing. And now I've knocked that level of detail down to about a third of what it was. And this is more appropriate, once again, for an object that's going to be viewed from a distance. All right, so that's the do's and don'ts about deleting and removing edges and vertices on an editable poly object. Use Control Backspace, and you won't have any of those orphan vertices left behind.